Hello and welcome to the program UFO Warning. In this episode, we're talking about the Virginia Coast Swarm. That's correct, the Virginia Coast Swarm. Now, that is a recent UFO sighting reported by the U.S. Navy, and it's brought to us by Aaro, A-A-R-O. That's a story in itself, and I think this kind of falls into one of those categories of what you ask for and what you get. Of course, we're asking for disclosure, and we're getting something that doesn't quite meet disclosure, but we're going to do our best to sort things out here. If you ask AI about this situation, just the sighting itself, it'll tell you that the term Virginia Coast Swarm relates to a high-profile military encounter with unidentified craft or mystery drone fleets off the East Coast over Virginia military installations, most notably the 17-day December 2023 incursions over Langley Air Force Base and earlier 2014 pilot sightings near Virginia Beach. So you have a series of sightings here. Notice right off the bat, they're calling these things drones. We don't know what they are. We have yet to recover any of these craft. I mean, as far as we know, they could be 3D imagery of some kind, a phenomena, but they're going to go ahead and get that narrative started, calling it a craft. In regard to this Langley Air Force Base, because I think it's important that we point out that there's a couple different incidences here, it says it incurred over 17 consecutive nights beginning in December 2023. Now remember, this is back in 2023, and there was all this talk about the drones flying over the east coast of the U.S., and Trump saying that they were going to get to the bottom of it, and then as soon as he got into office, they just said, well, problem solved. It was drones. Yeah, not much disclosure. As far as the craft description goes, it tells us that it's described as roughly 20 feet long. It moved at speeds over 100 miles per hour and altitude of 3,000 to 4,000 feet, emitting a sound resembling a parade of lawnmowers. Now that does sound like a drone, but just because it sounds like a drone doesn't mean that it is a drone. These things could be using sound to camouflage themselves. The flight path, well, it traveled south across the Chesapeake Bay toward Norfolk, passing sensitive defense areas, including the Naval Station at Norfolk and SEAL Team 6 headquarters. As far as response and policy, well, we know what happened. That's not much. Federal law prohibited the military from shooting down the craft because they did not present an exploit or immediate lethal threat. White House and Pentagon briefings followed, leaving officials split on whether the swarm represented clever hobbyist or foreign surveillance by nations like Russia or China. Why not just throw swamp gas in there while you're at it? This is a level of idiocy we have reached when it comes to denial about these things. Then there's the Virginia Beach FA-18 encounters, and this is clear back to 2014. The location of that was restricted warning areas roughly 100 miles southeast of Virginia Beach. Witness accounts, well, former Navy pilot Ryan Graves reported that the FA-18 Super Hornet squadrons detected unidentified anomalous phenomena, it's UAP, we call UFOs, in restricted airspace on a daily basis for over 2 years. It's got to the point where this is just routine. Characteristics, well, captured on advanced infrared and radar targeting pods, the objects displayed erratic movements without distinct propulsion. Yeah. And we know the pictures. We know these pictures have been dumbed down. And even people in the military are coming out and saying this now, that, hey, these don't even look like what we saw in the military. We know that they have high-def radar images, high-def imaging, and all this stuff. And what they're giving us is the equivalent of drawings that have been done by a kindergartner with crayons. It's ridiculous, actually. So that's kind of the background. We're talking about this range of sightings along the East Coast there, going back, well, now 12 years. Finally, AR gets around to releasing a report. I don't know what we're paying these guys. There's this article over at Defense Scoop. I'll just kind of give you some headlines of it. It says, Pentagon investigating mysterious UAP reported by the Navy near Virginia's coast. 12 years now, still investigating. The department's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office released its latest annual UAP caseload analysis this week. And this is written by Brandy Vincent, July 21st, 2026. Before I get into this caseload, just remember, we don't even know how much money these guys are given by the U.S. government. No one will tell us. It's estimated that it's around $11 million. We don't even know what the head of...
Hi, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. Are you looking for a beach read this summer? May I suggest your big wireless bill? It's got suspense, mystery, a slightly flat, emotional arc, and a shocking twist where you realize you've been overpaying the entire time. Fortunately, though, Mint's story is better. Every plan, $15 a month. Even unlimited. That's it. Happy ending, 0 tears.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
Aaro makes. Estimated between $159,000 and I think $259,000 a year. But we don't know. And who's to say what they're spending on travel and everything else that they participate in? So this thing's a money pit, even if it's a small money pit. Keep that in mind when they tell you in the article what you're getting for your $11 million. I think Newfork offers a much better value myself. Experts in the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office are investigating a report from the U.S. Navy involving roughly 100 mysterious airborne objects and watercraft that were recorded operating off the coast of Virginia. Actually, it's not a report. Actually, it's a bunch of reports. And notice also how the reporter here is setting these guys up as experts. That's appeal to authority. That's the fallacy going on here. They got a picture of the Aaro seal here. Who even knows how much they spent to have this thing made? It's got the little, I don't know, Latin thing, Universum Mateo established Aaro. Yeah, boy, they're really important. It says John Koloski's unclassified presentation back in 2024. Wouldn't you just love to follow these guys around for a day and see how little they do? Aaro's Fiscal 2025 Consolidated Annual Report on Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, released this week, briefly discloses that modern military account of UAP swarming near a U.S. installation, quote, a lack of timely and actionable sensor data continues to constrain Aaro's ability to resolve cases, officials wrote in a 14-page review. In other words, thank you for the $11 million, but we really couldn't figure anything out. You or I could actually do a better job just going online and reading about this stuff, honestly. Just pick a couple people at random and give them the $11 million for crying out loud. Launched under the Biden administration in 2022 to fulfill a mandate in that year's National Defense Authorization Act, AARO is charged with detecting mysterious objects reported across the air, land, sea, and space domains that could threaten national security or endanger military operations, and resolving the intent and origin of those recorded UAP. Congress made the directive to establish the office partly in response to mounting concerns that some UAP could be high-tech drones or other next-generation military platforms produced by U.S. adversaries. So they saw some UFOs and they thought, well, we'll throw some money out of here and see what we can get done. But you know what's not getting done? They're not explaining anything. The Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023 required the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense to jointly submit unclassified reports with classified annexes, that means blacked out pages, summarizing all UAP incidents and intelligence assessments for Congress annually for 4 years thereafter. Well, we saw what we've got so far. I mean, it's nice that we've got some stuff and we're talking about it. I'll say that. But mostly what we've got are a lot of older cases that have been talked about for a long time. All UAP-related events added into Aaro's caseload between June 2nd, 2024 and May 30th, 2025, and incidents occurring within any past reporting period that were not recorded in previous reports are included in the latest congressionally mandated analysis. Congress tells them to do something, and then it seems to me as though they just paint this with a broad brush and say, here's your report, give us the $11 million. Over the course of that year, AARO received 319 UFO reports in total, with 284 featuring UAP-related events from that reporting period, and 25 occurring between 2010 and 2024. Aaro resolved 114 of the 319 reports, each attributed to various prosaic objects such as balloons, birds, satellites, aircraft, UAS, and a single instance, each of a rocket launch and a manned jetpack, officials wrote. Now, if you're telling me, if we're talking about the jetpack man in LA, and you're going to tell me that was an actual person on a jetpack lingering around the takeoff and runway of LAX at a mile up in the air with the jetpacks on, I'm going to tell you that you are completely incompetent. I mean, we've been over this case a bunch of times. I guess I need to go back and look at it again. But the fact is, the pilots came in on landing and said, hey, there's something out there. It looks like a man in a jetpack. They didn't know. They have no idea. We have these humanoid flying objects show up regularly. This kind of shows you the shoddy work that Aaro's doing. The easiest thing in the world for them to do is the same thing Project Blue Book did, the same thing all these projects have done, and that is just to blow it off. Why not just write in swamp gas on all of them? Take the $11 million and go home. What a government gig. Goes on and says they confirmed that the office's case holdings contained 1,870 reports as of May 30th, 2025. That's one giant circular file cabinet. Of the 319 new reports that came in over that fiscal year, officials confirmed that 274 UAP reports were observed or captured in the air domain, 44 in the space domain, and 1 in the maritime domain. The single maritime domain UAP case Aaro received involved a report from U.S. Navy assets off the coast of Virginia. Their report described approximately 100 UAP and 2 likely uncrewed surface systems, the report states. AARO is actively investigating this event in coordination with the reporting unit. Wouldn't you like to know what exactly they mean by actively investigating? I don't know, sitting around, talking to Lou Elizondo on the phone maybe, getting their next meetup, lining up their next job after they leave this place as a UFO expert. Though details are sparse on that investigation, yet non-existent, it reflects how UAP-involved incidents continue to be routinely reported near U.S. military bases, testing ranges, nuclear power plants, and other locations, heightening potential for a direct security breach. But we can't shoot them down. We can't shoot them down until they do something. A Pentagon spokesman did not immediately respond to Defense Scoop's request for more information. On Tuesday, AARO received and analyzed several reports describing UAP in or near national security sites or critical infrastructure. Some narrative reports were suggestive of phenomena whose performance characteristics exceed the known state of the art within a given domain. Yeah, in other words, these things are doing things that our craft couldn't begin to do of. They're traveling and producing G-forces that no human could withstand. Remember what Fervor said? I believe it was him. If our airplane made a turn like that, it would turn the pilot into jelly. The human body cannot withstand these G-forces. New technical data accompanies these reports, officials wrote in the newly released document. It validated the attendant phenomena underlying these reports may represent a currently unmitigated threat vector. Part of Aaro's mission is to provide data and analysis that helps mitigate potential UAP-related national security threats or operational hazards. Blah, 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 blah. Notably, 2 cases in the current period described electronic or avionic interference as attributable to UAP in proximity to an operational aircraft. In other words, somebody saw a UFO and it was interfering with their electronic systems, with their ability to launch weapons, with their ability to detect stuff. According to officials, the office has not yet determined whether or to what extent those reported effects were due to UAP. Well, the guy's flying along, there's no problem, and he sees a UFO and suddenly he can't fire his weapons, or suddenly his radar doesn't work. And then the report from Aaro itself says that they are implementing a multi-year investment strategy to improve awareness across space, air, and maritime domains. Well, read, we need more money. These investments focus on augmenting existing U.S. government sensor architectures, prototyping and field testing new technologies, and developing novel analytic techniques using proven technologies and methodologies. So they're not really interested in hearing reports from you and I. They're going to hire their own consultants, their friends and family, for 6 figures a year to continue doing nothing. Similar to AAR's prior annual reports, officials maintain that none of the UAP cases resolved by the office to date indicate advanced foreign adversarial capabilities or breakthrough technologies in any domain. So what are we seeing then? This is the report about nothing. Among other new initiatives in the pipeline, AARO officials reveal that the office is currently developing a formalized process for handling UAP-derived materials by appropriate line organization, should such materials ever come into the government's possession. Well, I'm sure that the government already has a protocol for that, and it's called getting those materials into the hands of one of their deep state contractors immediately and sent off to a lab or a warehouse somewhere where you and I cannot FOIA request them. I want to finish up by taking a little closer look at these two major sightings that were addressed in this latest Aaro report, the Langley sighting and then the Virginia swarm. Now, there is a bunch of stuff written on both these, but the problem that you run into when you start to dive into these news reports is just the same couple paragraphs. It's almost like they were written by ChatGPT or something, and they get the official statement, they throw in a couple lines, try to include the word conspiracy 4 or 5 times, and just dump it out there and collect ad revenue. That's what I see. And so the kind of facts that we're looking for are hard to come by, and it would take a couple days to go through every single article and report just to try to make sense of this. So I ran it through AI because it can do in a couple seconds what it would take me today to do. And I asked it about Langley, and it said, well, why Langley matters. The Joint Base Langley-Eustis is one of America's most strategically important military installations. It houses F-22 Raptor stealth fighters, Air Combat Command Headquarters, intelligence units, advanced surveillance assets. So we have our most advanced stuff there. We have Air Combat Command Headquarters, the guys giving the instructions. We got the F-22 stealth fighters. I mean, these are the airplanes that are designed to go in there and do what needs to be done and to protect this country. They've got intelligence units. They've got advanced surveillance assets. And then we have these so-called drones flying over them, and they're told not to shoot them down. I mean, something stinks. It says that nearby are the Naval Station Norfolk, Newport News Shipbuilding, Huntington Ingalls, and Coast Guard facilities. So you got other government facilities, other military facilities, and we got these Department of War contractors. Collectively, Hampton Roads is one of the world's highest concentrations of military assets. Any unknown aircraft operating repeatedly in this area immediately becomes a national security concern. Yet they're told they can't shoot these things down. Now, this incident we're talking about, December 6, 2023. Personnel first observed unidentified drones after sunset. Initially, commanders believed the event might be isolated. Instead, the drones returned. Well, this is kind of human behavior. They see something, they can't explain it, so they say, okay, well, it must be a one-off. No, not really. It came back. Following nights, every evening, drones arrived after dark, flew over restricted military airspace, remained for extended periods, departed before morning. This pattern continued for 17 consecutive nights. Now, they got that from the Washington Examiner. 17 nights in a row, 2.5 weeks. They just show up to this probably most concentrated geographical area of military hardware and intelligence anywhere in the world, hang out, have a look all night long, and then leave when they feel like it. Something's terribly wrong here. It goes on, it says, military observers described varying sizes, different lighting configurations, coordinated formations, aircraft splitting and regrouping, some objects reportedly as large as a small automobile. Retired General Mark Kelly later described the events publicly, noting that personnel watched from rooftops using binoculars and night vision equipment because conventional identification methods proved insufficient. In other words, they didn't have a clue what these things were, so let's get a pair of big binoculars or night vision goggles. And they still can't tell us what they were. Now, military response. The response escalated quickly. Really? Organizations reportedly involved Air Force, FBI, FAA, NORAD, NORTHCOM, Department of Defense leadership. Aircraft and sensors were used to monitor the activity, but no publicly announced interception or identification occurred. So the response escalated quickly into what? Standing around watching? F-22 relocation, perhaps the most startling consequence. Some F-22 Raptors were temporarily relocated away from Langley to reduce potential surveillance exposure while the incursions continued. This reflected concern that the repeated overflights could be collecting intelligence on sensitive aircraft operations. I don't know why you wouldn't just shoot them down then. They're in restricted airspace. Why weren't the drones shot down? This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the case. Now, when I see this sentence right here, this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the case. This tells me that AI's core computation is doing a little narrative control for us. Although the military has counter-drone technology, using it over U.S. soil is constrained by law and safety concerns. Potential issues include disrupting civilian communications. Well, if those civilians are communicating with the Russians or the Chinese about our F-22s, then I think we probably want those communications disrupted. Interfering with GPS. Again, whose GPS? Creating hazards from falling debris. Well, they're over a military installation. Maybe just as soon as they come in over the perimeter where there's nothing that can be damaged, blast them out of the sky. And legal limits on domestic use of certain counter-UAS authorities. These constraints significantly complicated an immediate response. There's also a thing called doing your job. At some point, when these things fly over your high-powered defense positions long enough, after, 17 days, you just have to say enough is enough and start taking them out. That's common sense. Possible explanations. Foreign intelligence collected. This remains one of the leading hypotheses discussed publicly. Mapping radar coverage, observing F-22 operations, testing response times, gathering electronic intelligence. While China and Russia are often mentioned in public discussion, no public evidence has identified any nation as responsible. Well, if you think it's the Chinese or the Russians, all the more reason to shoot these things down. Sophisticated commercial drone operation. A coordinated team with commercially available drones could conduct repeated surveillance if launched from multiple nearby locations. However, sustaining nightly operations near a major military installation without public attribution would require considerable planning and resources. Yeah, and you're going to tell me that they're not capable of tracking remote control radio signals to these drones? More nonsense. Classified U.S. program. Some observers have suggested the drones could have been part of a U.S. government test. There is no public evidence supporting this explanation, and officials have consistently referred to the aircraft as unauthorized. Non-human intelligence. Some UFO researchers have linked Langley to broader UAP discussions. However, based on publicly available information, there is no evidence that the Langley objects displayed extraordinary characteristics such as instantaneous acceleration, trans-medium travel, impossible maneuvers, or other behaviors commonly cited in classic UAP cases. The available descriptions fit the profile of drone-like aircraft rather than exotic aircraft. Well, I'm assuming these things could assume whatever profile they want. Connections to other incidents. The Langley incursions are often compared with the 2019-20 Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas drone swarm. We've covered that here in the podcast extensively. Later drone reports over military facilities and the widespread East Coast drone reports in late 2024 also covered that. That was right before the election, during and after the election. Never did get disclosure on that. These similarities have fueled speculation about a recurring surveillance pattern, but there is no public evidence proving the incidents were conducted by the same operators? Well, until you shoot one of these things down and find out where it came from, there's not going to be. Intelligence questions still unanswered. Publicly, we still don't know where the drones were launched, who the operators were, if radar did track them continuously, what radio frequencies were used, did they transmit encrypted telemetry, and why did they appear only after dark? We also don't know if they were collecting electronic intelligence or if any were recovered. And we certainly don't know if underwater or maritime platforms played a role. Well, we do know that some of these things were tracked coming in and going out into the Atlantic Ocean. We don't know how far out you would take a battery-operated drone. And these unanswered questions are a major reason the incident continues to attract attention. I got to tell you, this is a true new level of craziness. It almost looks like, to my conspiracy-oriented mind, as if, in this case, the U.S. military is actually the subordinate actor, and the entities with these UFOs or drones or whatever you want to call them that are violating our airspace, clearly spying on us 17 days in a row, these are owned and controlled by the dominant actor. And it's almost as if our military is just being a good boy, doing what they're told. And maybe this is part of that whole, well, some people speculate as a contract that's been signed with these foreign entities, and by foreign I mean ET or extra-dimensional, to where they get to come in and check out our cool stuff, just to make sure that we aren't getting too far along. In the same way that we might go into another nation and double check to make sure that they don't have nuclear weapons or that they are abiding by a treaty, it's almost like these guys are doing the same thing to us. But if word of that got out, you can imagine how literally chaotic things would become with John Q. Public. Now, I want to take a quick look at this one from Virginia. We can kind of take a look at it and see what's going on there the best we can. Now, what they're calling the Virginia Coast Swarm, I think it's even more interesting, and it's a lot more recent. AI tells us that the Virginia Coast Swarm is one of the most intriguing cases disclosed in the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO's Fiscal Year 2025 Annual Report. Unlike many entries in the report that were resolved as balloons, satellites, drones, or other conventional objects, this incident remains under active investigation and is the only maritime domain case specifically highlighted by AARO. It was located off the coast of Virginia. The exact location is withheld. Well, that's to be expected, I suppose, with these Navy sightings. The date is not publicly disclosed. We're only told that it happened sometime in 2025 during that reporting period, and that the reporting agency was the U.S. Navy. Remember, the U.S. Navy probably has secrecy perfected more than even the CIA itself. I mean, they're all about coding and keeping things compartmentalized and keeping things quiet. You look into that and you'll find out what I'm talking about. The witnesses were U.S. Navy personnel operating military assets, and then the objects reported were approximately 100 airborne UAP, or what we call UFO, 2 likely uncrewed surface systems on the water. Now that's a twist there. So you've got 100 of these UFOs flying around, and then you got a couple of objects on the surface of the water. Weird. Status, active investigation. Well, I don't know what there's to be active about it. They've seen it. I mean, they've got the pictures, I'm sure, but they're not sharing them with us. Official classification, unidentified anomalous phenomena. Unlike the Langley Air Force Base incursions, which were described as unauthorized drones, this case is officially described only as UAP. AARO has not publicly identified the objects or offered an explanation. So in other words, sometimes these things don't even bother to disguise themselves as drones. They just do what they're going to do. The official description, the entire official case consists of a single paragraph in the FY 2025 report. Quote, the single maritime domain UAP case AARO received involved a report from the U.S. Navy assets operating off the coast of Virginia. The report described approximately 100 airborne UAP and 2 likely uncrewed surface systems. AARO is actively investigating this event in coordination with the reporting unit. It says that paragraph is the only official public description currently available. Wouldn't you love to talk to some of the guys that saw this? Now, why is this case different? Several aspects distinguish this event from the majority of Aaro's case files. One, it was not resolved. During the reporting incident, Aaro resolved 114 reports as balloons, satellites, aircraft, birds, unmanned aircraft systems, one commercial rocket launch, and one manned jet. The Virginia maritime event was not placed in any of those categories. Instead, Aaro stated it remains under investigation. That tells me there's probably pictures somewhere or video that are undeniable. The number of objects, most publicly released military UAP cases involve one or two objects or a handful of contacts. Here, the Navy reported approximately 100 airborne objects. That makes this one of the largest officially acknowledged UAP swarm events ever disclosed in the U.S. government. Now, when you're talking about 100 UFOs here at one time, if these things are armed and dangerous, you've got enough right there that could wipe out a fleet of ships. That's the biggest fear right now in the military, I think, is defending against swarms of drones. Well, imagine swarms of UFOs. Multi-domain activity. The report also mentions two likely uncrewed surface systems. That means Navy personnel observed airborne unknowns, surface craft on the ocean during the same event. Yeah, we've got UFO boats and UFO flying objects. Importantly, Aaro does not state that the airborne and surface objects interacted, coordinated, or moved between the air and the water. It only reports that both were present. Now it says, where did it occur? Only one location is identified, off the coast of Virginia. Although the exact position is classified or withheld, this region includes the Virginia Capes, that's VACAPES for the acronym, operating area, and waters near Naval Station Norfolk, Naval Air Station Oceana, Joint Base Langley Eustis, and Major Carrier Strike Group training areas. These are among the busiest military operating areas in the United States. So we got them in 2014, and then we've got them back here, in 2024. It says what data was released, surprisingly little. The report does not provide radar tracks, infrared imagery, photographs, cockpit video, duration, altitude, speed, heading, weather conditions, or the number of observing platforms. There are also no witness interviews or technical appendices. This lack of detail limits any independent assessment. Well, so much for disclosure. What was Aaro able to confirm? The report confirms only a few facts. U.S. Navy assets made the report. Roughly 100 airborne UAPs were observed. 2 likely unmanned surface systems were also reported. The case remains under active investigation. Everything beyond those points remains undisclosed or unknown. Now, you can go on, and it does speculate a little bit about whether it's foreign actors, the same old crew, whether it's drones, or whether it's some kind of non-human intelligence. But I think you have to make up your own mind from this. We see these ironclad reports coming in from the U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, Army, whatever, and they're funneled into Aaro, who they're telling us that they're going to be able to do the job of investigating this stuff. And when they do come across a really good report like this, they just say, yeah, somebody saw something. We're not getting a thing telling us about the properties these things demonstrated, really even what they look like, who saw them, what ships they were on when they saw them, how they were interacting with the USOs. Nothing. Just, yeah, somebody saw something. That's why I wanted to bring this up. I think these are both really interesting events. The stuff going on in Langley and then the stuff going on over here on the Virginia coast. At least they're acknowledging that it happened. But you have to ask yourself, for $11 million, are we really getting what we paid for? To me, not so much. Hey, if you like the program, don't forget to hit like, follow, subscribe. Doesn't cost a dime. As always, thank you to the folks that support the program financially. It really helps. Until next time, this is UFO Warning. Over and out.